Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Talking with My Mouth Full. I'm your host, Rahul Akerkar, and today we're going to be talking about a subject that's very dear to my heart. We're going to do an ode to farm to fork and sustainability with none other than Chef Thomas Zacharias and his new venture, the Locavore. Thomas went from cooking food to looking for food, and he's really doing a lot right now to preserve and document this country's culinary heritage. So let's jump right in and have a really interesting chat with Chef Thomas. T-Zac. Thomas Zacharias. Hi, welcome. Chef earlier on at the Bombay Canteen and then jumped ship and is now doing something called the Locavore, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. And if you haven't, you will by the end of a little chat today. You'll know about his new initiatives. So, welcome.
Thanks.
How have you been?
I've been good. I've been busy. I should just mildly correct you. It's the locavore, so it's like saying herbivore, carnivore.
I know, but if it was Italian, I'd say Locavore. So it's just false on that. So.
But I started the locavore a year ago.
Mm.
I've been working on it ever since I left the Bombay Canteen, and I've been good, busy, keeping myself busy with the new venture. My first time being an entrepreneur, but it's exciting. It's a really thrilling ride, as I'm sure you've experienced over decades. But it's new to me.
Don't date me. You were on a certain trajectory at the time at the Bombay Canteen. You guys were making waves. You were, redefining, I think, Indian food a little bit and everything else. And it was on a pretty rapid upward trajectory. And then you just jump ship.
Yeah. So I think, again, my experience at the Bombay Canteen and through that, especially in all the travels that I did as part of my research for the menu, really showed me a very different side to Indian food systems. And I've now been to 26 states in the country exploring food.
Amazing.
Over the last 10 years. And over time, it started dawning on me that I wasn't really contributing or giving back to the same places I was taking inspiration from.
Mm.
So that started eating at me from inside. And I've been in the kitchen for 15 years. So I've done my time. You're absolutely right in the fact that the Bombay Canteen, I think, really redefined Indian food in restaurants, at least, about how I could do that. So it's a decision that I didn't just make very spontaneously. It took a couple of years to come to that conclusion. I gave Samir, Yash, and Chef Floyd, the late Chef Floyd, a good year and a half of notice to figure out how we can make my transition smooth. But in the end, I think I'm really grateful that I was bold enough to take that step because where I'm at today with the Locavore feels really meaningful and fulfilling, and I'm able to make those impacts.
So, how's it been for you, the Locavore? I can see, obviously, as we've been just talking, that it's everything that you wanted it to be.
It's been great. I think as soon as I left the Bombay Canteen and while I was I left without a plan. I wasn't leaving a restaurant. I was leaving my career as a full-time chef to figure out how I could make impact. And I realized with a lot of introspection that while I saw a lot of the issues and challenges within the food system, I also saw a lot of hope and optimism. I saw people and organizations who are doing a lot of work. And a lot of them simply needed access to a wider audience. They needed to understand how to tell their stories more effectively. They needed connects and network to the right people, or they needed different kinds of resources. And so the Locavore was born as a way to connect all the dots and become a facilitator and an enabler for different kinds of stories, food producers, create opportunities for consumers and people to engage and interact with these. And that's what we do. For us, storytelling is a big part of what we do. We've started doing a lot of events in different cities. We're going to do our first travel experience next month where people can actually pay and come along and interact with one of our food producers.
So you just kind of opened up a little window into your means to monetize what you're doing right now, which I'll come back to in a minute. But I wanted to say something is that I've always felt, over the last 30, 40 years that I've been doing this now, is that what's happening here very clearly is that, the old traditions of our cuisine being passed down mother to daughter, that whole chain is breaking. So I think what you're trying to do, correct me if I'm wrong, is to create a capsule, if you will, of what makes these traditions what they are, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And to keep them sort of alive, like you have a seed bank of seeds so that you can keep a species of tomato going, right?
Yeah.
Or rice or whatever it is.
So that is one part of what we do when it comes to preserving, celebrating food traditions, and that's a great example for me to explain how the Locavore would come in and make an intervention. We'll do storytelling around it. There'll be social media content around different food traditions and cuisines and recipes.
I love the way you say intervention, like it's you guys are failing. Let me come in and fix you.
No comments on that. But it cannot. There have been platforms and publications that have done storytelling, and I strongly believe that storytelling is really, really powerful, but that alone cannot do the work. So then we bring in engagement through events and travel experiences and make it tangible for people. We close the loop by, if somebody is cooking a bajra roti, where can someone buy that bajra from?
Sure.
And not just where they can buy it from, but
I get it. I mean, you have
an entire ecosystem.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And now we've actually started taking on social projects. So that's the other part of the puzzle, where can we bring together all of these different collaborators, we get consumers to volunteer their time and be part of projects that can actually make an impact in different localities as well.
That's really amazing. What a strong trigger, taste and smell is of childhood memories and such. So my question to you is, as you try different cuisines and like different styles of food and different ingredients all over, can you actually relate to those other things? I mean, it's like almost akin to saying, as you said, that when you were traveling in Italy, why am I cooking Italian food? It's so different to what I grew up with cooking.
Now that I've traveled so extensively, I can categorically say that there are so many parallels between cuisines in India, and there are very strong parallels in emotion centered around our food. So this, we spoke a little earlier about the sense of loss and the need to preserve. That exists everywhere. I've heard that so many times over and over again.
That's amazing. The hair in the back of my neck just stood up. I don't have much on top, but the back definitely stood up just now. It's nice to hear.
And I've been hearing it for 9 years now. You can imagine when you're hearing that over and over again, that's what propelled me into leaving being a chef and going on this journey with the Locavore now. But I think there are a lot of parallels in how we approach food, in what food means in our communities. And I would say there are parallels between cuisines around the world as well. I've now traveled through Europe. I've been to Japan. I've been to even Israel, and there are so many parallels. Which, I mean, if you're willing to take your blinders out and actually assess, you'll actually find parallels.
Sure.
So for me, it's not been really so alien. The one thing I know I will kind of come back with is a sense of not knowing much. I always travel, and the more I travel, the more I realize how little I know. So it's that curiosity and openness to keep learning and absorbing and figuring out how, again, you can try and make interventions to solve some of these issues.
How are you documenting all this?
A large part of it has been
video, film.
I have photos, videos, notes. The documentation has not been done in a structured way because it's a lot.
Is that what's going to come next?
If anybody from Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of those OTTs listening,
there's the plug, guys. There's the plug.
No, I've been
pay attention.
I've been wanting to do it for a long time. It's just that usually, I mean, what I hear is that non-fiction food content in India doesn't sell. But if anybody...
Non-fiction food.
Yeah.
I love it. You mean realism.
Yes.
That's so tragic. So right there is a complete sort of conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying reality and the sort of joy of the essence of the food doesn't sell. Yet that's precisely what you're chasing after,
Yeah,
right?
but
Isn't
but
it?
this is what the data says. I don't know if it's actually there's enough to back it up, but what I can tell you is what I've seen out there on my travels is just incredible.
So clearly, you don't miss the kitchen anymore, right?
No, so because I pondered over this departure from the kitchen for a couple of years, I had time for it to sink in. The only sad part was my last proper service as a chef was 15th of March when we all had to shut down our
Shut down.
restaurant. So I didn't
Yeah.
have a proper farewell. I didn't know that that night would be my last service, and that would have been nice. But I'm still cooking. I still cook at events that we organize through the Locavore. I was in Shillong a couple of months ago cooking with an organization called Nesfas, which is tied to the slow food movement.
Mm.
And we actually got 5 local chefs and about 15 millet farmers to come together and solve this conundrum that the millet growers weren't eating millets anymore, and the
Right.
people in the local communities weren't eating millets anymore. So we went there and I worked with the local chefs to put
Is that a fact?
Yeah.
That they're not eating millet anymore?
Yeah, the millet consumption has gone down drastically.
Why?
And the number one reason is taste. Because the only way they cook
No
millets
way.
is just by boiling them.
Boiling them, yeah.
So we did a workshop for a day cooking with them.
But
and
that's really surprising because you would think that, I mean, our cuisines are so rich that it doesn't seem to me that boiling would be the only way that they have.
that's how they've known for the last few
Wow.
generations. So we went there and we created a menu of 20 dishes, out of which 12 highlighted, and it was really successful. We had
I'm sure.
the Minister of Agriculture of Meghalaya show up. We had the editor of one of the largest publications there show up. And so, it's these small interventions like this. Yeah.
Tell me something. You went through culinary school here and in the States, right?
6 years.
6 years. What did you feel about the culinary education that you got here in India? Few schools here, I think, really teach anything about local cuisine. And I don't mean just Indian food. Few schools really teach. And I've always maintained that it's very important, I think, for culinary schools in regions to first teach the cuisine of that region. Let them be a specialist in teaching the cuisine of that region, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you can learn everything else too as part of a general syllabus that you need to do to understand food. But, if you're looking at, let's say, a 3-year diploma program or a 4-year program, the first 2 years you do general, and then the next year or next 2 years you do focused in the cuisine of that region. And to me, it would seem like that would be an obvious thing for you to tie into, and to help revamp education here.
Yeah. So that's definitely something I want to try and do through the Locavore. Again, to give you context, I went to culinary school, which actually at the time there were no culinary schools in India.
Yeah.
So I did hotel management course 20 years ago. There's an institute called Waksha, which is in Manipal, which is connected to the ITC. And back then, the only time we really learned Indian cooking was in a class called Quantity Production, where we cooked.
Quantity production,
Yeah,
bulk cooking.
Bulk cooking, where we cooked at the cafeteria.
Central gravies.
But there was an interesting thing that college did was we celebrated every festival in India.
Oh, that's nice.
And every time we celebrated a festival, there was
You did
music.
the food of
We
that,
did the food
of that region.
So that was one opportunity. But today, I can very proudly say that the same institute has a culinary course and is actively focusing on regional Indian cooking. So they get visiting chefs and cooks from different parts of the country to come and teach recipes, and it's in their curriculum. And I know that there are a few other colleges in India doing the same. But I completely agree. I mean, I think that's one of the problems of where today's mid-level to high-end chefs are at is because they've been taught to put French cuisine on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And if you've traveled through the country in India as I have, you'll know that our techniques and traditions and recipes and ingredients are far more diverse, far more advanced, far more nuanced than anything.
Just plain fucking delicious.
Yeah,
man.
and delicious. Like I've spent a whole month in France, and I've spent the last 10 years traveling through India, and I can categorically tell you that, we have
not a
so
patch.
much. Yeah. So I think a mindset shift has to happen, and I do believe that the work that we've done as restaurants like the Bombay Canteen has enabled educational institutions to start thinking about their curriculums around Indian food differently. But yeah, I mean, getting into the education space and molding and shaping those curriculums is something that we want to do at the Locavore as well.
I mean, you kind of look at restaurants like Thakkar Bhojanalaya here in Bombay, which is my favorite restaurant.
Yeah,
right?
mine too.
They have no menu. It changes every day. Every meal is different. It's a home cooked meal.
One of the few restaurants in a city as big as Bombay that's serving a seasonal menu.
Yeah, seasonal, exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think to yourself, it's like, if they can do it, why can't everyone else? And everybody raves. It's just a beautiful, simple, home cooked meal, traditional.
And it's not just that they can do it, and this is again a parallel to the Bombay Canteen as well. Is that it's not just
little plug.
I mean, I'm
teasing you.
I'm not a part of the restaurant anymore.
I'm teasing you, Thomas.
But it's not just the fact that it can be done, but it can be successful doing it.
Yes.
I think that's what
No question.
that's the bigger plot there.
Sometimes it may not be possible to replicate everything that you do in the traditional way that it was done, right? Because it takes too long. It's inefficient commercially. Let's put it that way. So, of course, the next thing then comes is the food, does it lend itself to innovation, to modernization? Can you adapt it for today, right? And that's something I'd like you to maybe just talk about a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean,
and also, is there a need to do it?
So that is exactly the questions I would ask when I came across dishes that inspired me on my travels. Is that one, will this food? I mean, has this food been served in restaurants in mainstream cities before? Two, am I doing justice by bringing these dishes to the forefront? Are they lesser known dishes? Are they is there a point to be made here? And then, do I need to alter it in some way to make it accessible for people in cities, or can they exist on their own? And if you do a little bit of asking those questions and approaching it from that direction, you'll get the answers. But the first thing that I would always do is recreate the original dish the way it is, before innovating. Because if you can't do that, then I mean, you're not really holding on to the integrity of those original inspirations. But again, a side note to that would be that I'm not also advocating that every restaurant or every new restaurant in India is a regional Indian restaurant.
No, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
No one's saying that.
Exactly. And even if you're opening an Italian restaurant in the city or in any part of India, you can at least try and incorporate local produce. I mean, if you go to
we did that at Indigo back in the day.
But you don't see any restaurants doing that, right? So there's no concept of you can bring seasonality and local produce into an Italian restaurant in Bombay or Delhi. But why aren't you doing that? So you can use local Indian ingredients in innovative ways and make it work for you.
So I guess part of what you're doing in Locavore and your Chef on the Road and all these things, it's a jump from traditional working in kitchens to, I guess, into the milieu of not social media, but media in general, right?
I think the media is just one part of it. Like I said, there's a lot of on-ground implementation. I'll give you an example. We've taken on this project called the Worli Kolivada project with RPG Foundation.
I meant to ask you about that, but sorry, go on.
The RPG Foundation does something called the Heritage Project, where they identify localities and neighborhoods in Bombay, and then come in and figure out how they can uplift those communities, bring in community development. And so the Locavores come in to take on the food part of the Worli Kolivada area and see how we can bring those stories of those communities, their food culture, their history, their challenges, the impact of coastal development and climate change on fishing in those areas to the forefront, but also see how we can come in and provide maybe new livelihood opportunities. So we are actually, RPG Foundation is doing a heritage walk in the area, and we're going to add food stops in the heritage
Brilliant.
walk, which are actually cooked by women from self-help groups within the community.
Oh, nice.
We are looking at putting together a cloud kitchen and potentially kickstarting food brands for these self-help groups, of bringing those cuisines and those dishes to the forefront. I mean, today,
So you actually help community to sort of support itself,
yeah,
if you will,
yeah,
through
absolutely.
through a cloud
Yeah,
kitchen.
yeah. So that's
Amazing.
I mean, so I would say we're in the space of impact.
It's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. It's like, what do you think about chefs who are only online? There are a lot of them. You're sort of real versus real chefs, right? People who are just online, turning a buck, having fun doing it, but without much thought really that goes into it, right? I mean, what about that?
I think, I mean, it's fine if you're taking the trajectory and going online fully, but even if you're just solely a chef who has an online presence, are you trying to bring any good to the world? Are you changing perceptions around food? Are you, like, what are you actually doing through?
Almost none are.
I mean, so that's
they're all selling. They're selling gimmicks on TikTok.
Yeah, so
right?
that's my qualm with it. So my issue isn't so much that they are solely online chefs. My issue is that it's just like trash in, trash out. There's only like there's
and it's a shame because they have the ability to make change.
Exactly.
Right?
A lot of them have
just
such
choose not to.
wide audiences, and
I don't think they choose not to. They're just not clued into it. They're just not thinking.
I
about
think
it, right?
the reasoning which I have heard from a few friends that I have in who are in the space is that this is what the audience demands. So they go with what sells, right? Which is unfortunate.
That's a bit of a
it's
what comes first, the chicken or the egg,
exactly,
right? I mean, are you like doing it to be commercial so that you get your likes and you get your views and you get your money, right?
Yeah, I mean, and at some point you have to be bold and take risks, and I think it'll pay off if your intentions are genuine. A lot of what we do at the Locavore is centered around the idea of trying to make a difference, trying to bring change, and getting more and more people onto the bandwagon. And I think one of the things that we are trying to push for is that you don't need to, do all at once, right? So even with people who are coming onto a platform, interacting with us through either events or through the content we put out, the idea is that just start with small steps, start with baby steps, at least bring a certain curiosity and openness to your lives and how you interact with food. Very often when you think about ideas around sustainability and food, it's usually extreme,
Yeah.
You either have to go all organic or you're evil. And again, there's
it's always about little steps, isn't it?
Exactly.
Everybody making a little. It's about mindfulness at the end of the
exactly.
day, right?
Yeah. So I think that's a message I'd like to leave.
How important is that for a chef today to have a social media presence? Do you just and how should you actually feed that?
I think whether you like it or not, it is important. It wasn't, say, 8 years ago when I started actively, doing a lot of storytelling around the work that I did. But clearly, it's helped me build my career and do what I do at the Locavore a lot in part because of that. I think the thing about social media, which is not just true for chefs and restaurants, but across the board, is that your social media needs to be a reflection of who you are as a brand and your identity, and that needs to have some merit and some substance to it.
Right.
So I would say, firstly, like, focus on that. So
tell a story, in other words.
Tell a story, but you need to have a story to tell. Are you telling that story through your restaurant and your food anyway? And we touched upon that a little earlier, where there isn't as much thought that goes into or a sense of purpose around the food that chefs in India have today. And if those stories genuinely tie into the work that you do.
Yeah. All right, great. That's fantastic, guys. You've all been listening to Chef T. Zach. I was corrected earlier on. He never goes by his first name, Thomas. So
thank you.
Chef T. Zach, who's doing amazing things with Locavore. If you guys don't know about it, please log on and definitely look him up and look at what they're doing. And if there's any ways you can think you can contribute, I just like to say, going out on a limb here, that you should, because I think what they're doing is amazing for the future of food and cuisine in this country. So
Thank you so much.
amazing job.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to keep having these chats with you over the years.
Fist bump. Well, I think it's amazing. I really enjoyed this chat with you.
Thank you.
That was exciting, wasn't it? To see entrepreneurial chefs really embrace the local produce and culinary heritage of this country in preserving it. I'm Rahul Akerkar. That's a ship, talking with my mouth full. I'll see you in the next episode.
IVM